Hello. My apologies for this coming so late in the afternoon on a Friday when I actually promised this to you this morning. So, what I did was moved some things in our plan tab forward one day. So, I'm not going to make the analysis for the close reading and analysis for, I should say, of this story due until Monday. And I am out proctoring the ACT on Monday. Just a reminder for that as well. But in this lesson, in this tutorial, we'll be doing a close reading and analysis of Those Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. So I did have you watch for kind of a part one analysis. I had you watch a YouTube that was recorded by a professor. Hopefully you got some things out of that that helped you in understanding and analyzing the story. And this is just going to be a deeper dive into the story because there are things that I want to point out about this story, but also some things that you're going to need to know for upcoming assignments, upcoming lessons. All right, so learning targets for this lesson. I want you to be able to say that you can do the following when this lesson is done. I want you to be able to say that you can identify literary devices in The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, that you can identify sensory details in the story, that you can understand annotation strategies that are used in close reading, or at least the way I do close reading and the way I would like you to do close reading in this course, so that you can gain better understanding of the text. That's what the main thing close reading does and annotating does, is it just helps you gain better understanding, a deeper understanding, if you will. I want you to be able to say that you can find the meaning or clarify the meaning of unknown words by consulting reference materials or applying word solving strategies. I want you to be able to describe in your own words what the specific conflicts are in the story. Remember, this unit is conflicts in literature. This story falls under the category, probably falls under a couple different categories, but the category that we're looking at right now is man versus society. And I want you to be able to say that you can apply higher level thinking to evaluate the allegorical meaning of a story, particularly this story, and apply it to real world situations. Now, if you don't know what an allegory is or you're not sure, hopefully my tutorial here will help you figure that out. All right, so The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, you have read the story. We're just going to take a deeper dive into it now. Not a super long story, which is kind of nice, I'm sure, for you. And then I did give you in your reading a copy of this um, artist's rendition of the way they see Omelas. And I always find it very intriguing to kind of zoom in on this piece of artwork and find all the details in it. So hopefully I remember to do this to kind of keep pointing certain things out. But just a couple things right now that I wanted to point out are, oh shoot, I wish I had a better pointer tool. Oh well. These mountain or these peaks that surround the city, this water feature. Um, I'm sure you know at this point what this little gray cube is. And it's supposed to give us the effect that it's in the basement, though. But then there's like this arena. There are these little trails that go out from the out from the mountain peaks, off into this kind of gray area. These red roofs. I want to see, are there flags flying? Yeah, there are little banners and flags, and I think for sure they're red rooftops. I thought there were like banners somewhere. Maybe not. Maybe I made that up in my brain. Anyway, I know what's in the story. Boats in the harbor. So anyway, I find this particular artist's rendering of the story very cool. All right, what did I do? I ended up shrinking my Come on. I want it larger. Where's my zoomer? Oh well, maybe that's gonna have to work. Wow, I hope that doesn't disrupt this whole thing. Anywho, all right. This is from a collection of short stories from the full book with all the stories in it is called The Wind's 12 Quarters. So if you liked this story and you want to read some of her others, I highly recommend. All right, so starts out here with this very short piece with a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring. The festival of a summer came to the city Omelas, bright towered by the sea. The rigging of the boats in the harbor sparkled. And I'm already going to pause here because as you can see, I have all these little things, these little fun things. I've got an ear here and an eye here. And this is just to show you, as part of annotating and annotating strategies, I want you to start like using little symbols, little icons. You can draw these by hand if you have like an actual hardcover in front of you that you own, or in these digital renderings. Just insert these little icons and things. So the reason I put an ear here is because and an eye actually, I want to point out the sensory details. This introduction, just these, we haven't even gotten through one. Oh yeah, we're on two sentences right here. Not even a full two sentences yet. And I already know that this story is going to be a real treat for the senses. And I can hear right away, boom, there's my sense of hearing, a clamor of bells. And then this imagery, these swallows soaring. If you've ever been kind of like out in a field, especially near like a farm, um, I mean, really anywhere I've seen them, but even at parks, like underneath like a pavilion or something, these swallows like swooping and soaring, right? And that's just got such a visual for me. So I can hear these bells clanging, I can see these swallows soaring, and I know it's summer. It's festival of summer, so I already have this sense of like warmth. Um, Bright towered by the sea. Ah, there's a water feature. Okay. The rigging of the boats in the harbor sparkled. And again, I already pointed out to you in that picture um, that the artist that drew that picture, this is how it looks to them. So um, I also want to point out that there's this literary device used called alliteration. And you've probably heard of alliteration before, but oh my lord, this is a perfect example of it. See if you can hear what sound, not what letter. Students get that misperception sometimes. I'm not looking for a letter, I'm looking for a sound. Listen for the sound. With a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring, the festival of summer came to the city Omelas, bright towered by the sea. The rigging of the boats in the harbor sparkled. Hopefully, you were able to pick up on this alliteration of this repeated S sound. Again, it's not the letter, it's the sound. And a soft C can also make S that sound, right? So, with a clamor of the bells, and I didn't underline the S in bells because that's got more of a Z sound. With a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring, festival, summer, city, omelas, sea, boats, sparkled. Hopefully, you can hear that repeated S sound. And it makes for just such a lovely um, just feeling when you're reading this story. And you might ask yourself, why isn't it even important to learn about literary devices? And I'll just say that they are powerful tools. And if you're going to be a good reader, if you're going to be reading for academics, if you're going to be reading for pleasure, it's really important not to overlook literary devices that are used in storytelling and in poetry and in music, right? In the songs that we hear. Some of the greatest songwriters of our generation use literary devices. if you ever want to have a fun afternoon, look up on YouTube. Ugh, I wish I could think of the guy's name. You could probably even just search YouTube, and there is a professor that looks at Taylor Swift songs and uses. He's from Harvard, or he's a Harvard professor. Anyway, he looks at Taylor Swift lyrics in a poetic sense or in an academic sense. It's pretty cool. All right. Literary devices add emphasis to phrases. They evoke moods and emotions. They provide insight into an author's words. They make the storytelling more clear and more vivid to us. I know I pointed out to you this literary device of repetition in um, To Build a Fire, the story that we just read. All right. And I keep track of, that's part of annotating for me, is keeping track of some of these things when I'm reading. So that's why I made a chart here with various literary devices that I found. All right. So we left off on the boats in harbor sparkled with flags. Oh, see, I knew there were flags in this story. In the streets between houses with red roofs and painted walls, between old moss grown gardens and under avenues of trees. And I put that little eye there because I can see this in my mind's eye. I can see these old moss grown gardens. I can see these avenues of trees. Past great parks and public buildings, processions moved. Some were decorous, old people in long, stiff robes of mauve and gray, grave master workmen, quiet, merry women, carrying their babies and chatting as they walked. In other streets, the music beat faster, a shimmering of gong and tambourine. I could hear that. And the people went dancing. The procession was a dance. Children dodged in and out, their high calls rising like the swallows crossing flights over the music and the singing. There's those swallows again. It's just got this merriment, this feeling of merriment to it. I can hear it. I can see it. All the processions wound toward the north side of the city, where on the great water meadow called the Green Fields, boys and girls, naked in the bright air, with mud-stained feet and ankles and long, lithe arms, exercised their restive horses before the race. Ooh, there's another alliteration that I just pointed out too. So if I ask you at some point for some alliteration examples, here's another one. See if you can listen for it. Um, long live. I don't know why I'm having such trouble reading right now. Long lithe arms exercise their restive horses before the race. I hear this r r r. Arms exercised, restive horses before the race. I can hear that. So that would be another example of alliteration, that r sound. And then you'll notice I put an orange question mark here. I do that for things that I don't know, whether it's a word I want to look up or a phrase I don't understand. I'll just put like a question mark there. And I try on these digital ones to keep it orange just so that I'm kind of on the lookout for, I can see them right away. I also use a heart here for things that I just happen to like. I loved this phrase, the great water meadow. Oh, a water meadow. It really made me think, and I just loved the way that sounded. I actually was not familiar with the word restive, and I wanted to know what restive horses were. So I looked up that word. I love when I come across words that I don't know. I mean, I have read hundreds and hundreds of books, and when I can come across words I don't know, it's really fun for me. So I looked up restive in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it said restive means stubbornly resisting control, fidgety, impatient, uneasiness. And I'm like, oh yeah, that would describe horses, who were kind of being held back, right? The horses wore no gear at all but a halter without bit. That meant a lot to me. I'm not sure why I didn't underline that, because that is a very meaningful thing in my mind. A halter without bit. There are people who believe, and I actually have felt sorry for horses sometimes when they have that bit in their mouth. And I understand it's a form of controlling the horse and steering the horse, but imagine having a metal bar back by your molars and like having to sit there with that all day. So to me, this kind of showed that the horses were unrestrained, and I kind of loved that. I mean, they have a halter, but they don't have a bit. So it's just this humane kind of idea in my head. And then also, I made a note here that I'm circling words with joyful connotations because I was surprised how many there were. And it also fits the idea of what's happening in the story, right? That there are all these joyful connotations. Their manes were braided with streamers of silver, gold, and green. And I'm also taking note of color because it's, a form of imagery. They flared their nostrils and pranced and boasted to one another. They were vastly excited, the horse being the only animal who has adopted our ceremonies as his own. I put a question mark there too. And then I made a note down here. What is meant by the horse being the only animal who has adopted our ceremonies as his own? Hmm. I really don't even have an answer to why she put that and what she means by it. But horses must be important because they're in this story a few times. And the fact that she says it's the only animal who has adopted our ceremonies as his own. Is that because like horses are majestic? I don't know. I don't know why horses. I don't see things about dogs in here or monkeys. I mean, I see the swallows, I see the horse. So I don't know, kind of interesting, something to think about, something I'm going to look into at some point. Far off to the north and west, the mountains stood up half encircling Omelas on her bay. Oh my gosh, go back to that picture. It's exactly half encircling the city on her bay. It's like, oh, cool. You can tell that the person who drew that or painted that or whatever medium they used, you can tell they really closely read this story to be able to do that rendering. The air of the morning was so clear that the snow, still crowning the 18 peaks, and I actually went to that picture and counted 18 peaks, I thought that was cool, burned with white gold fire across the miles of sunlit air. Under the dark blue of the sky, there was just enough wind to make the banners that marked the racecourse snap and flutter now and then. And I thought that was a really nice sensory detail for the sense of touch, this idea that, just enough wind, just that lovely breeze that we sometimes get on a summer's day, right? Just enough to make the banners snap and flutter now and then. So I put that on my sensory collection. In the silence of the broad green meadows, one could hear the music winding through the city streets, farther and nearer and ever approaching, a cheerful, faint sweetness of the air that broke from time to time, trembled and gathered together, and broke out into the great joyous clanging of the bells. There it is again in my sensory, in my hearing. I will also say I should have put uh, a orange. I do this thing when I make a connection to something like either another text or just anything, some kind of connection that I make. So I put this orange arrow and then I, will usually describe why, and I'll just tell you why here. But this clanging of the bells reminds me so much of the Edgar Allan Poe uh, poem. I think it's just called The Bells. And I don't know. So I made that text to text connotation. That's what good readers do. So when you do things like that, make note of it. It shows me you're a really strong reader too. All right. I guess that's it on that page. Joyous. How is one to tell about joy? How describe the citizens of Omelas? Usually when a author puts a question in their story, it's unusual because typically we don't ask questions of our reader. That's kind of a breaking of rules for authors. So the fact that she's doing that, two questions posed to the reader, it stops you from reading, right? It's like, wait, you're expecting me to answer a question? She's using it rhetorically here, but I don't know, just kind of an interesting device that she's using there. They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy. They're not simple, they're happy. We do not say the words of cheer much anymore. All smiles have become archaic. Given a description such as this, one tends to make certain assumptions. So I think what she means here is that um, when everybody's happy, when happy is just commonplace, we don't call attention to it much anymore. So this has got to be a lovely place to be when we don't even have to call attention to our happiness. It's a given. It's a mainstay. Given a description such as this, one tends to make certain assumptions. Given a description such as this, one tends to look next for the king, mounted on a splendid stallion. Here we are with horses again, and surrounded by his noble knights, or perhaps in a golden litter borne by great muscled slaves. But there was no king. They did not use swords or keep slaves. They were not barbarians. I do not know the rules and laws of their society, but I suspect that they were singularly few. And I put a star there, and then over here I wrote, perhaps laws aren't necessary when everyone is happy. Could that be? That's sort of, again, a rhetorical question or hypothetical thing, but it made me think, and I like to question text as I'm reading. As they did without monarchy and slavery, so they also got on without the stock exchange, the advertisement. Imagine a world without advertisements. I can't even, I don't even have a conception of that. The secret police and the bomb. The bomb. She doesn't even just say bombs. She says the bomb. And I don't know if she is referring to maybe the atomic bomb, which is going to be important in the next story we're going to read. So I don't know, made me think about that. Yet I repeat that these were not simple folk, not dulcet shepherds, noble savages, bland utopians. She doesn't want us to think of them as dull or savage or bland. I actually looked up the word dulcet and I wondered if it had something to do with being dull. And it says no, it doesn't say anything about dull. It says dulcet means sweet and soothing. And so the fact that she's saying dulcet shepherds is an interesting phrasing. They were not sweet and soothing shepherds. Okay. They were not less complex than us. The trouble is that everybody outside of Omelas, we have a bad habit encouraged by pedants, I hope I'm saying that right, and sophisticates of considering happiness as something rather stupid. That really made me pause. That really made me think. Is that true? Do we think of happiness as something rather stupid? Like, do we think of like that blind ignorance or ignorance is bliss kind of thing? I also look at pedant. I looked up pedants. I know the word pedantic, so I sort of knew what it meant. I've been accused a time or two of being pedantic. So I looked up pedant, and it was a person who is excess. Oh, I didn't spell that right. Excessively. I must have been typing very, very fast. Who is excessively concerned with minor details and rules or with displaying academic learning. You can see why I might have been accused of being pedantic before. All right. Only pain is intellectual. I also thought that was interesting. If you think about it, we've heard the old saying, art comes from pain. Only pain is intellectual. Only evil interesting. I wonder if that's true. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. And if you don't know what banality is or banal, look that up too. If you can't lick them, join them. If it hurts, repeat it. Oh, okay. But to praise despair is to condemn delight. To embrace violence is to lose hold of everything else. This is very, very deep, like something that deserves coming back to it again and again to really pick apart what is being said here. We have almost lost hold. We can no longer describe a happy man, nor make any celebration of joy. How can I tell you about the people of Omelas? They were not naive and happy children, though their children were, in fact, happy. They were mature, intelligent, passionate adults whose lives were not wretched. Oh, miracle! But I wish I could describe it better. I wish I could convince you. Omelas sounds, in my words, like a city in a fairy tale. Long ago and far away, once upon a time. Perhaps it would be best if you imagined it as your own fancy bids, assuming it will rise to the occasion, for certainly I cannot suit you all. For instance, how about technology? Now I want to pause for a minute. I can't suit you all. What she wants us to do is imagine for ourselves what a city of ultimate joy, happiness, joyfulness, merriment, what is that for us? And then she mentions this thing, technology, and I put a star there because the next story we're going to read is really this is just such a great connection because it's our next story is a lot about technology. We're going to be doing man versus technology. I think, and again, she's saying you come up with what it means for you, but for me, I think there would be no cars or helicopters in and above the streets. No cars zooming around, no helicopters overhead. That's her idea of delight, right? This follows from the fact that the people of Omelas are happy people. Happiness is based on a just discrimination of what is necessary, what is neither necessary nor destructive, and what is destructive. So she's giving us a definition of sorts of what happiness is based on or based upon. And I put a little squiggle, a purple squiggle under that middle one because she says in the middle category, she's referencing above, what is neither necessary nor destructive. In the middle of the category, however, that of the unnecessary but undestructive, that of comfort, luxury, exuberance, etc., they could perfectly well have had, the people of Omelas, could perfectly well have central heating, right? That there's nothing destructive about that, but it is a nice comfort, to have heating in our homes. They could perfectly well have had subway trains, washing machines, and all kinds of marvelous devices not even invented here, such as floating light sources, fuel-less power, a cure for the common cold. Or they could have none of that. It doesn't matter. As you like it. I have two things to point out about that word, as you like it. So I made that text to text connection because As You Like It is a Shakespeare play. So that was interesting to me. Um, it also makes me think back to when the author wrote in her foreword about psychomyths and without spatial or temporal limits. I gave you the foreword. I didn't assign it, but I did give you the foreword to the story, or actually the foreword in the book, the collection. So whether you read it or not, I don't know. But I thought it was interesting that in her foreword, she says most of the straight narrative stories in this volume are in fact connected with my novels, in that they fit more or less well into the rather erratic future history scheme, which all my science fiction books follow. Those that don't fit in are the early fantasies, and then the later ones I call psychomyths, more or less surrealistic tales which share with fantasy the quality of taking place outside any history, outside of time, in that region of the living mind. I love that, the region of the living mind, which, without involving any consideration of immortality, seems to be without spatial or temporal limits at all. And I feel like that describes this story for sure. So it just made me think about when she said that, when I got to As You Like It. Um, she's not going to tell you what these limits are to what this city of ultimate joy is about. What do you find joyful, right? That's what the city is. I incline to think that people from towns up and down the coast have been coming into Omelas during the last days before the festival on very fast little trains and double deck trams, and that the train station of Omelas is actually the handsomest building in town, though plainer than the magnificent farmers market. But even granted trains, I fear that Omelas so far strikes some of you as goody goody. Smiles, bells, parades, horses, bleh. If so, please add an orgy. If an orgy would help, don't hesitate. Again, as you like it. If in your mind the ultimate city has that, go ahead and add that. And I'm going to spare you me reading any of this, orgy stuff. Um, but I did write in purple here, whatever your idea is of all that is wonderful. This is my take. And that includes, what might think of as sexually gratifying. This might include drugs if that's your gig. If that is not your cup of tea, so be it. As long as it isn't detrimental to others, maybe is maybe the only rule. Um, but you drum up in your own imagination is kind of what this author is saying. Is what Le Guin is saying to what you think is all that is wonderful. What would you have in your city? That's what Omelas has. All right. Let them join the processions. Let tambourines be struck above the copulations, and the glory of desire be proclaimed upon the gongs. And a not unimportant point, let the offspring of all these delightful rituals, if there's going to be sexual gratification and offspring is a result of that, um, may the offspring be beloved and looked after by all. And I thought that was so sweet of an idea. Children born in Omelas are beloved and looked after by all. It's like, could we? I mean, that is the ultimate hope for me anyway, and so many people I talk to, like that every little child would be loved, that every little child would go to bed with food, a full tummy and feel loved, right? Wouldn't that be utopia, for so many of us, especially as a mother? That is definitely something that I wish for my children, for my future grandchildren, for my students. I would love that all my students could go to bed feeling loved and feeling full. One thing I know there is none of in Omelas is guilt. But what else should there be? I thought at first there were no drugs, but that is puritanical. For those who like it, she's not saying she does, but for those who like it, the faint, insistent suite of drews. Now, I believe that is just a made up word that she made up. And I consider that to be onomatopoeia. So I put that up in my little bank of literary devices under onomatopoeia. The faint, insistent sweetness of drews may perfume the ways of the city. Drews, which, it's kind of to me like a combination of drugs and booze. Maybe that was her intent. I don't know. Which first brings in a great lightness and a brilliance to the mind and limbs, and then dreamy languor and wonderful visions. So yeah, methinks maybe she is not, all for drugs, but maybe has partaken in them at some point. Okay, where was I here? Oh, here we go. Drews. Um, so hey, if drugs is part of your wonder, then go ahead, put it in that city as you like it. But she doesn't want there to be any clergy, and she doesn't want there to be any soldiers. She doesn't mind if there's temples, but she even says something about beer, which I thought was so funny. Um, uh, where did she? Anyway, like I said, I'll spare you me reading those kinds of things. But the joy built upon successful slaughter is not the right kind of joy. So if you're somebody who, you know, receives joy from slaughtering things or people, that is not the kind of joy she is talking about here for Omelas. It is fearful and it is trivial. A boundless and generous contentment, a magnanimous, and that's a word if you don't know magnanimous, should be looking that up, right? Or circling it and then looking it up later. A magnanimous triumph felt not against some outer enemy, but in communion with the finest and fairest in the souls of all men everywhere, and the splendor of the world's summer. I thought that was a beautiful phrase, so I put a heart there. The splendor of the world's summer. I just love that phrase. The world's summer. What would that be? Because we all know that there are summer is happening somewhere else in the world right now. We're having winter, someone else is having summer. So what's the world's summer? I thought that was an interesting phrase there. This is what swells the hearts of the people of Omelas, and the victory they celebrate is that of life. I really don't think many of them need to take Drews. All right. So I'm not going to like read every single part of this story. That would bore you to death. But I did want to point out a couple more things here, such as the marvelous smell of cooking. There's that sensory detail yet. She doesn't say exactly what kind of cooking, but again, what do we consider marvelous? A pot roast, corn dogs, hamburgers. I don't know. What's cooking? Is it a barbecue? And then there's this guy, this older man with a beard, and there's some rich pastry in his beard. So, maybe there is marvelous smell of, mini donuts and things too. Oh, here's those horses again. The youths and girls have mounted their horses and are beginning to group around the starting line. And then there's this little vision of this child playing a flute. So I could see and kind of hear what that might be like. People pause and listen to him, and then he finishes and he slowly lowers his hands. And at that point, a trumpet sounds from a pavilion, imperious, melancholy, piercing. Here are those horses again. Horses have got to be something important, and I need to look into this a little bit further because there is a lot of taco horses in this story. Horses rearing on their slender legs, some of them neigh in answer. All right. And I believe this might be the only dialogue in the story. Quiet, quiet, there, my beauty, my hope. I found a simile, so I put that in my literary devices. It says the crowds along the racecourse are like a field of grass and flowers in the wind. And I thought that was also a very lovely phrase. So I put that up under simile. And where am I here? Lost my place. Here's another question popping up. And remember when I told you that's unusual for an author to ask questions of us, especially these rhetorical questions? Do you believe? Do you believe? I'm not really sure where she wants the emphasis there. Do you believe? Do you accept the festival? The city? The joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. All right. So if you're in disbelief, if you've, not been able to suspend your disbelief, let me describe something else. And I even put that quote down here because I thought it was really what the story's going to take a turn here. Oh my gosh, what's that called in a sonnet? It starts with a V. I'm looking it up when the sonnet takes a turn. Volta. A volta. I don't know why I couldn't think of it. This is sort of the volta here, where things take a turn in the story. So she asks us this question about whether we believe or not. And then she says, in a basement, under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. So we already know it's well below the city, right? It has one locked door and no window. A little light seeps in dustily between cracks in the boards, secondhand from a cobwebbed window somewhere across the cellar. In one corner of the little room, a couple of mops with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads stand near a rusty bucket. If you've ever taken clothes out of the wash machine after they've been left in there too long, if you've ever smelled a musty rag, that's been sitting on the sink too long, we know what that foul-smelling mop head would smell like, that foul smell. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. The room is about 3 paces long and 2 wide. 3 paces, so, probably an adult walking 3 steps. 3 paces long and 2 wide, so very small. A mere broom closet or disused tool room. In the room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but is actually nearly 10. It is feeble. And I just made some notes about what the room description is. So, cobwebs, dampness, musty mops, rusty bucket, dirt floor, quotes, a mere broom closet. The child is actually 10 but looks much younger, undefined gender. I think it's interesting that they refer to the child as it as well. It is feeble minded. Perhaps it was born defective, or perhaps it has become imbecile through fear, malnutrition, and neglect. Well, holy smokes, has this story ever taken a turn? Because we went from all of these beautiful, joy, joyous smiles, happy, cheer, delight, celebration, passionate, happy, happy, joy, joy, literally, to what we're dealing with now. I'm not seeing any joy, joy, happy, 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 joy, joy here. It picks its nose and occasionally fumbles vaguely with its toes or genitals as it sits hunched in the corner farthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. It is afraid of the mops. It finds them horrible. It shuts its eyes but knows the mops are still standing there and the door is locked and nobody will come. The door is always locked and nobody ever comes, except that sometimes the child has no understanding of time or interval. Sometimes the door rattles terribly and opens and a person or several people are there. Must feel like a zoo animal, right? One of them may come in and kick the child to make it stand up. Holy cow. This is where, the story gets so dark here. So again, without, having to read through all of this, because I know you've read this already, it really is just a horrible condition that this child, it couldn't be described any more terrible. He gets cornmeal and grease and not enough to even fill him up because with a belly protruding, it means he's malnourished, right? He has no muscle tone. And then it says they all know it's there, all the people of Omelas. So everyone knows about this. This is far from being secret. In fact, they mean to know about it. And some of them even come and look in on him like a little zoo animal. Others are content merely to know it's there. They know it has to be there. Some of them understand why and some do not, but they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest, and the kindly weathers of their skies depend wholly on this child's abominable misery. Everyone knows about it. They even start telling the children of Omelas when they're old enough to understand, between 8 and 12, whatever they're capable of. Then it says that people who come in and look at this child, they're always shocked and they're always sickened by seeing this poor child and its misery, and they feel disgusted. And it says they feel disgust which they thought themselves superior to. They didn't even know they had the capability of feeling disgust, but they feel disgust when they see this child. They feel anger, outrage, impotence, despite all the explanations. And they would like to do something for the child, but there's nothing they can do. If the child were brought up into the sunlight out of that vile place, if it were cleaned and fed and comforted, that would be a good thing. Indeed, but if it were done in that day and hour, all the prosperity and beauty and delight of Omelas would wither and be destroyed. Those are the terms. To exchange all the goodness and grace of every life in Omelas for that single small improvement, to throw away the happiness of thousands for the chance of the happiness of one, that would be to let guilt within the walls indeed. And remember earlier it said Omelas was without guilt. These ding 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 are hugely utilitarianism ideals. And I mentioned utilitarianism in one of the slides I think I had for you in the overview, and then the YouTube video that you watched recently also described John Stuart Mill and William, dang it, what's his last name? It's escaping me at the moment. Anyway, these utilitarianism ideals, that falls under that heading. The terms are strict and absolute. There may not even be a kind word spoken to the child. And then here is where it starts to describe how some people, after they see this child, they what can't handle it, can't take it. And so what do? They walk away. I'm going to back up just for a second here. I made this note of, I'm going to make this a little larger so I can read it. I made this note of the fact that we really need to look at ourselves when we're reading this story. And that's the whole point of this author writing this story, is it's this allegorical take on, we can't claim ourselves as innocents. We can't claim to be the people in Omelas who don't walk away, that stay in Omelas in their utopia. And these are my words. I just said none of us is innocent. We know there are luxuries we enjoy. And by luxuries, I don't mean, that it all has to be diamond rings and, tropical vacations. That's not what I mean. But so I put luxuries in quotation marks. But we know there are these luxuries that we enjoy at the expense of some poor, overworked child somewhere on the planet. And it sickens us, and we don't want to think about it. I mean, out of sight, out of mind. We would like to do something, but what can we do? What can I do? What can Miss Carlson do? What can my neighbor do about a child in Bangladesh who is making cheap clothing or making cheap shoes? We don't want to think about it. It's disgusting. Can I still have my iPhone? At what expense? I mean, iPhones are expensive, but not so expensive that most of us can't have one. Well, why is that? Is that because some poor kid is making them somewhere? Is some kid, some 10-year-old kid, working in a factory for 14 hours a day? I don't know. I probably. And what am I doing about it? I mean, can I still have my affordable shoes and my affordable clothing if this child isn't doing that? It's a horrible thing to think about, but it's something this author thinks we need to think about. So, thank goodness there are these people in Omelas who walk out of the city gates and they just keep walking. At times, one does not, in fact, go home at all. Sometimes a man or a woman falls silent for a day or two and then leaves home. They go out in the street and they walk down the street alone. They keep walking and walking and walking out of the gates, across the farmlands, through the mountains, and out into the darkness. They go west or north toward the mountains. They go on. They leave Omelas. They walk ahead into the darkness, and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist, but they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelas. So this should be leaving you thinking. That's what this story is about, is leaving you thinking. What are your thoughts? Where do they go? What happens to them? Those who walk away from Omelas, where do they go? What happens to them? And maybe, if we can't answer that, maybe it's enough to know that some do walk away, that some do refuse to play a part in that child's suffering, that some do not buy into these utilitarian ideals of, some have to suffer for the good of all or the good of the majority. And if we're honest with ourselves, would we walk away? Well, that's not a would we. Do we walk away? Because I already mentioned how so many of our goods and services are rendered on the backs of the unfortunate. All right. If I go back here, hang on. Oh no, here, I forgot one slide here. I wanted to talk about conflict because I promised you that was one of our lesson targets, and I know I'm coming up on just about 50 minutes here. I'm going to end this soon. But I want you to be thinking about if I ask you what the conflict is. I noticed this in a couple of my other Nearpod lessons that when I asked you what the conflict was, it wasn't incorrect. Some of you said, man versus himself, like in the Sonny's Blues. Some mentioned, oh, it's man versus nature in to build a fire. Yes, that's true. Maybe I should have posed the question differently because what I really want you to do is give me a more specific of, yeah, it's man versus society is the conflict in this story, but who specifically? What specifically? How specifically? Why specifically? Who in this story is society, and what is it about the society of Omelas? What's the conflict here? Who is the man? Is it the ones who walk away? Is it us? So yeah, it's man versus society, but who's the man versus who is the society in this particular story? And if we consider this an allegory, what is it an allegory of? And I want to give you the definition of what an allegory is so that you can answer that question. So, an allegory is a narrative in which characters, events, and settings represent abstract ideas with moral qualities. This whole story is a moral tale, right? So, if you've seen the Lorax, maybe that kind of helps, or Sneetches, that's another one. But this story is definitely an allegory of something. Um, it represents these abstract ideas, it represents this moral dilemma. All right. That is it for now. Thank you for watching, and I will have some sort of an assessment for you. I haven't decided yet if it's going to be a quiz or a writing prompt or what it's going to be yet, but be looking for an assessment to go along with this. Thank you.